Hello everyone, my name is Kirsty. Welcome back to Upside Down Books, and today we're going to be doing a much requested video and talking about my research at university last year.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di
So this is going to be the first of maybe two videos, maybe a few more videos, I'm not sure, where I'm going to be breaking down for you what I discovered, uncovered, revealed, found out through writing my thesis last year at university. So if you've been following me over the last year, then you're probably already aware that I was conducting research. I asked a lot of you to participate in a survey, and thank you very much to everyone who did. I was speaking to booktubers and publicists, and I was finding out how booktube fits into the world of publishing and how we help make things happen and get popular and get people reading. Now, I've done this specifically with a lens of the Australian booktube community, but I hope that you'll find it interesting if you're watching from other countries, and even if you're not a booktuber, you're not a publisher, and you're just the average person watching a video, I hope that you'll find this interesting to find out more about who's watching these videos, what we do, how you get review copies, how you work with publishers, what they want from you, and all sorts of things. So I hope that this will become a little series of videos that you can watch to answer these questions, because we all have loads of questions over how these things work, and I think a lot of us would like to know some of the questions, particularly around review copies and the inner workings of these things, because it's just all a bit unclear sometimes, and it's a very exciting world to be a part of. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy watching these videos as they come out. So today I'm going to be focusing on viewership, and we're going to be looking at who watches booktube. So this whole thing is going to be what is booktube, and we're going to break it down into small sections because it would just be way too big of a video if I was telling you all in one go about everything that I learned. So to give you a recap, I conducted this research over the course of a year, and it was for my master's degree, so postgraduate research at university, and I interviewed about 11 people, and I surveyed over 100 people to get these responses and gather the data and analyze it. I also used my own experience as a booktuber, as I have been on here since about 2017, and I was able to use lots of my data, so I'll be talking about my own statistics as well, because I always think that's really great when we can open up and talk about these things, such as what kind of engagement I'm getting and how different videos are performing, so that we can all just have a bit more clarity on the whole thing. So yes, today is going to be looking at viewership and who the people are who watch booktube and what they like to see and how they get their books. So I hope that today's video will be of interest to many different people, just as a pure interesting point of fact for those that have no real use for it, but for people like publishers or other booktubers, it might give you insight into the best ways to produce content that's going to perform the best, or as a publisher it might give you an idea of how booktube works and the people that you can reach through booktubers. So I've got lots of fun statistics to share with you today, so we're going to dive in from the top and we're just going to make our way down and come out the other side feeling more enlightened about what is going on in this community of the internet. I'm going to assume that most people here are probably aware of what BookTube is. BookTube is this community online of people who love talking about books. It's been going for the last 10, 12, 15 years. In the 2010s was when it became quite popular and really took off as people were using YouTube more and more. So yeah, there's loads of us on here creating content and just talking to our heart's content about books and how we love them and how much we've been reading. So the people that I surveyed for my research, about 60% of them were Australian and 40% were overseas. Obviously, being the internet, it is a global community, so we are not just looking at Australians in terms of viewers. When I talk in later videos about publishers and booktubers on that side of things, that is quite Australian specific, but today is quite applicable to the global scene, I would have thought. So of the people that I surveyed, we had about 96% of people who were often watching YouTube videos, whether that was all the time or just quite regularly. It was a very, very, very low percentage of people. In fact, people who never watched it were completely excluded from the survey, so this is only gathering data from people who have engaged to some degree with booktube, and on the most part it is people who are watching on a regular basis. So I think the first interesting statistic we can talk about is the fact that 86% of people are finding their new books via social media, and there was other statistics done in other research that 20% of people are using YouTube as the platform of choice in order to find new books, and I think that comes as no surprise to us because we are all people who engage a lot online, whether it's Goodreads, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we are there, Twitter, talking about books and finding recommendations that way. It's a very powerful tool to find new books, and I think a lot of us tend to be introverted as well, so social media is a really great way to reach those kind of communities and those people like us who don't always enjoy being out in the real world and talking to people. But that being said, that is the leading category, but it isn't the only way that people are finding new books. Other ways that people are finding books is also just through shopping online or in store at bookstores, so that was about 67% of people that were finding it that way, so still quite a healthy percentage of people are finding books via browsing. And yeah, that wasn't split between brick and mortar stores and online. That's just a big grouped one to look at how people are engaging with the way that bookstores are promoting their own books. I think we all could say that we enjoy browsing through bookstores, especially through bargain sections, to find books. It's just a fun way to do it. I personally love going to the bookstore and going through the shelves and picking something out. It's just such a lovely way to do it. I think the other interesting fact that's always worthwhile mentioning is the fact that about 77% of people who are watching BookTube will buy their books from places that will provide financial kickback to authors and publishing houses, and that's something that's really important to authors and publishing houses. And it's not always a way that people can afford, or maybe for ethical reasons they might be buying secondhand, etc, etc. But it is really great to support the publishing industry and authors by shopping from places, first-hand places, libraries, book boxes, you name it. All of those provide different amounts of revenue back to publishers and authors, and that's a really great way to make sure that they can continue performing their art form, continue writing, continue producing things. Without that kind of support, the industry wouldn't exist. So it's really exciting to see that the majority of people engaging with BookTube are those people buying from places that are providing support to the institution and the industry. So well done us for spending all of our money irresponsibly. We're doing a great job. I think I'm probably single-handedly propping up the industry at this point. It certainly feels like it. The other thing that I think is the most debunked thing that I found in my research was the fact that it's not just a YA community. I've had so many people talk to me and being like, oh, it's just about YA, you know, fantasy, romance, blah, blah, blah. And that is just, it's not true. Let's just start with that simple point. It's not true. We all come from so many different diverse backgrounds and of diverse interests in reading. And so when you engage with anyone here on YouTube, on BookTube, you are likely to engage with people that are reading all sorts of genres. And it is obviously a little bit trickier, especially with the nature of how you find YouTube videos for publishers in particular, to find people who are engaging with like thrillers or, you know, not the fantasy ones, because that is pushed a lot by the algorithm, but that's not actually reflecting the reality of the conversations that are going on. And you'll know that if you follow me here on my channel, I talk about a whole slew of books. I love non-fiction, I love historical fiction, I love fantasy, sci-fi, and so on and so forth. There are so many different books to read. So it is interesting that whilst fantasy is not the only thing being talked about, it is one of the biggest contenders still. In fact, it is the largest portion, but not by a landslide. So there's about 84% of people who are engaging with sci-fi and fantasy. However, it's a 70% overlap between people who are reading both young adult and adults. So 70% of people are reading all age categories when it comes to fantasy, sci-fi, and then there's just that small percentage of people that are exclusively reading either or. So it's really not just an exclusive YA community. People are looking at all this broad sweep of different books that we can get. But more importantly, when you look at other genres, we've also got 44% of people really enjoy their mysteries, their thrillers and their crimes. We've got 37% of people reading general fiction or contemporary. There's also a whopping 24% of people who are reading non-fiction, and I thought that was the most interesting thing, and I really liked discovering that statistic, to know that there are other people like me out there who are engaging with memoirs or information books, history books, you name it. That non-fiction genre is actually going quite strong. 25% of people reading that is actually a really healthy amount of people. So high five to everyone else out there who's also enjoying that non-fiction genre. We've also got 36% people reading romance. So romance, I feel, is an increasingly popular or more spoken about genre these days. So there's a really high percentage of people who are engaging with BookTube who are enjoying those romance stories as well. What is even more interesting, and I think is something to applaud our enormous reading efforts on, is how many books BookTube watchers are reading per year. You guys have been doing a lot of reading. I actually genuinely thought I'd split this into different categories. So I'd gone from 1 to 10 books, and then, you know, 10 to 50, 50 to 100, and 100 plus. And I did not expect the majority of people to be sitting high. I thought it would be lower. The more sort of, when you talk to people offline, and I think this is probably a really good example of the differences you get from offline versus online. A lot of people don't read books, or they'll read a couple of books a year. I don't meet that many avid readers in real life unless I'm going to a book specific event. So I was really surprised by these results. I found out that 34% of people are reading between 10 and 49 books a year, which is like a really big chunk of people reading a very significant number of books per year. But even more exciting, there's another 32% of people who are reading between 50 and 99 books. So there's the same amount, again, who are going even more hardcore and are sitting in a really high category. And I myself fall into that category. Most reading years I will read over 50 books. And then, get this, and hold on to your hats here, 28% of people are reading more than 100 books a year. I was not expecting that. It actually leaves with less than 6% of people reading fewer than 10 books a year. I found this so interesting to explore, and I thought that really was quite revealing in the kinds of people that are watching my videos, that we are talking to and engaging with, and the kind of people sitting out there who are engaging with booktube videos. So it's a really intense concentration of people who are avid readers, and I just, yeah, I love that. I love that for us, and also just like well done to that enormous percentage of people who are reading 100 books a year. I will forever be jealous of your reading capacity. It's just, that was fascinating to me. So the point that I found with the research and exploring who is watching the booktubers, to prove the point that it's a really worthwhile community engaging with via booktubers if you're a publisher, because you are reaching out to this community of people who predominantly are providing financial kickback to the industry and are reading an enormous number of books per year. So, you know, there's a lot of money being generated by the people in this interweb community here, which I think is fantastic. So when we turn our gaze to what kind of content they're enjoying, this was also really interesting to see the kind of videos that on the whole people are preferring. So we've got 69% of people prefer recommendation videos. So the kind of video that goes like, if you like this, then you would like this. But that was the majority of people ticks that. This is the kind of question where people could tick multiple answers, so these aren't out of 100%, it's just 69% of participants who responded did select this as a choice. We also then had close behind with 64% who liked wrap-up videos, so people who like it when you sit down and talk about like a monthly or a yearly wrap-up and see what people have been reading. Those have been really popular and were high up there. And then we also had quite the surprising collection of videos that each came in at about 58%. Now this was so interesting to me because I wasn't really expecting these. I was expecting one of them, that was book hauls. So 58% of people said they really like book hauls, but 58% of people also said they enjoyed vlogs, and 58% of people love book reviews. Now, the whole book review business is so, like, at odds and ends with what people think people want and what people are actually enjoying. You'll see as we talk through the rest of these statistics that there's these kind of almost discrepancies between people saying, I really like this content, but I don't watch much of it, or I like this content, but there's not much being made of it, and all that kind of thing. So book reviews are such a unique and interesting thing, and I think anyone watching this will know that they're not very common. I myself don't often find time to sit down and do a single book review or even a multiple book review. It doesn't happen very often. It usually happens within a review video. And yet we've got a huge amount, 58% of people, who enjoy and prefer watching book reviews. So it's something worthwhile of note, especially to other fellow booktubers out there, is that it is a video that is in demand and it is something that people want to engage with, and we should probably be making a little bit more time to make them. I know I myself would love to spend a bit more time making review videos. Just following that, we then had 49% who enjoyed challenge videos. So that's your kind of the game ones where you're doing something as a challenge to find this many books that make up this word, blah 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 blah. That's actually quite popular as well. And I didn't have any stats from my own survey about TBRs, but looking at my own analytics of my own channel, I can say that out of the 12 most popular videos on my channel, 50% of them are TBR videos. And I think it kind of goes without saying that TBR videos do tend to be some of the most popular videos out there. But when you're looking at them through the lens of how good are they for promotional content in partnerships with publishers, because a lot of people enjoy the TBR game videos, it's a bit tricky to try and fit in product placement in those ones. But nonetheless, it's still worth mentioning that those are also quite popular. I then turned to asking people what was the optimum video length. There are loads of Google searches that you can do and different lengths that people will tell you. I think it's usually between like 7, I don't know, 14, 12 minutes is the optimal video length for a YouTube video, but you know, we all have no idea what's going on with algorithms and people's preferences these days. So I really wanted to ask this, and I was expecting shorter videos to be popular, and I was wrong. So the majority of people, and it came out with 95% of people enjoyed a longer video, with longer meaning 10 minutes or more. So when I broke that down, we had 31% preferring a 10-minute video, 33% for a 15-minute, and 32% for 20-minute video. So it's sort of like even splits between people enjoying these videos that are up to sort of 20 minutes. I didn't take it beyond that point because I think it's more common to see regular content 20 minutes or less, maybe half an hour, give or take. But yeah, it left like a really small percentage of people who were actually enjoying videos that were 5 minutes or less. So that is something to bear in mind for fellow content creators out there, is that the popular preference is actually for the longer video length. Another question that was then explored was how many books per video people enjoy seeing. So I found that a whopping 89% of people preferred seeing more than one book. So the more books you've got in the video, the happier they are. But it doesn't mean go for hundreds and hundreds, because I further explored this particularly in the context of reviewing, and there is a limit to how many books people are enjoying seeing. So 43% of people enjoyed 5 books or more in videos, and then that could drop down down to 28% who were enjoying 3 books per video. And then the going further down than that, so for the 2 and the 1 and the 4, you had significantly lower numbers. So it was just 6% of people enjoy seeing a single book in a video, which I think is really interesting, and I actually think it kind of is quite enlightening to see what people are thinking in their thought process as they're going through the survey, because when you compare it to people then saying they like book reviews and how many people find single book reviews valuable, it doesn't quite match up with preference, but that could reflect on like the majority of their videos they prefer seeing with more, but they still enjoy single book reviews, or perhaps they're thinking, oh well, I don't always like every single book review because I haven't read all those books, so they're not all applicable. So book reviews are very much so a case into their own. They're difficult to analyse in that sense, but still more to come on that front in a bit. So for my own channel, I can reflect, it doesn't really reflect that people aren't enjoying that, because I actually found that single book review videos, so one book that you're reviewing, have a really unique like shelf life. They're very long term in terms of the fact that they will outperform most other videos. So I found a lot of the videos on my channel, in fact my top videos on my channel, are book review videos. Some of my top performing videos are my review of Shadow of the Fox, my recap of Outlander, and my review of To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. All of these have been on YouTube for quite a number of years in some cases, and the longer that they're on, the better they perform. They have this really long-term performing arc where, because as more people read the book and they go and seek it out on YouTube to get reviews and opinions on it, you just continuously gather those views, and the more you gather, the more YouTube will push the video as well. So it has this really interesting sort of slow game effect that if you're looking for a video that's going to have instant likes and rewards, then review videos are probably never going to be the way to go unless you're doing something like a Sarah J Maas on the day that it comes out. That is going to be its own thing. But for the average book and any book that you're doing, I think they're a really wonderful resource to have, and I love seeing when people do individual book review videos, because I think it creates that wonderful opportunity to open discussions about those books, and people want to. Over a course of many years, as long as that video is up, people still engage with those videos. So I think review videos are really interesting and worthwhile doing. Another great statistic to know is that 89% of people found it really helpful if you compare books in videos. So when you're reviewing and talking about something, if you can give it a comparison, a lot of people seem to enjoy that because it gives them a reference point, some way to gauge where that book sits in the whole spectrum of things. The other thing I liked, I was interested to ask, was how well people knew the nationality of their booktubers. I think on the production side of things, so for booktubers and for publishers engaging with booktubers, nationality is quite important. If you're going to get an Australian publisher with an Australian book, we'll try and seek out Australian booktubers to reach supposedly an Australian audience. And I think that's the one assumption that really doesn't actually line up, because whilst I would say it's indicative of my survey result that 61% of people were Australian, I was reaching a large Australian community, it's not exclusively Australian, and there's a really large percentage of international people there. So I thought it was interesting to ask the audience to say, well, how well do you know whether you're watching any Australian booktubers? And overwhelmingly, I found that around 60 to 70% of people were watching a few, had an idea that they were watching a few, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people follow Little Book Owl and know that she's Australian, and maybe that's ticking a box for them, because she is a very big Australian booktuber on the international stage. But I found that really interesting, and a lot of people, particularly when you split between the international audience and the Australian audience, just didn't really know if they were watching any. They didn't know, or they weren't watching any, and that is because you get, you know, the smaller community of Australians on the internet versus the really large dominating presence of Americans. So I think that's an interesting note, just sort of a fun fact for some of us, and probably something that's actually quite helpful for publishers to know, is that an Australian booktuber doesn't necessarily guarantee an Australian audience. However, you are likely to get, you know, somewhat more Australians following Australian booktubers. So it was just an interesting conversation, and I'd love to see more research done around that, because it is just fascinating to know who you're reaching and how to reach them. I do think it leads into the question of you know, opening up conversations about the purpose of engaging with different booktubers from that side of things, because the content creator themselves has that kind of information to know who is following them. So I always think if there is a particular agenda as a publisher that you're trying to reach a particular audience, the best thing you can do is talk to the people and be like, hey, we're looking for this, can you offer it? Is your audience from London? Is it from New York? Is it from Sydney? Those kind of things are only the content creator is going to be able to answer that. So it is a very interesting point. I then asked people what kind of videos have inspired them to buy books in the past, and I thought this was great too to find out, really helpful. The biggest category was that 66% of people said that wrap-up videos are what inspired them to buy books. So you can only assume there that it is likely to do with the passion or the stronger emotions you're probably going to get post reading a book that has caused people to go out and buy the book. But we also had 55% of people bought it because of reviews. So again, really high number of people buying books because of reviews, really low number of people saying that they are enjoying single book reviews, really high percentage of people saying they enjoy seeing review videos. So yeah, really conflicting statistics there. Obviously it has some variation of, you know, acknowledging the multiple review versus single review video, but still quite the different wave in between the statistics. We then have 50% buying them because of book hauls. Book hauls are so exciting, I totally get that, and I do that all the time. And then I turn my gaze towards star ratings to see how much a booktuber's rating can influence things. So I think this is like the biggest question that we have online, and something that as an ongoing conversation is very interesting to see how much influence someone can have by saying, oh, this is 2 stars. Does that book never get bought again, or does it generate more interest? And how much does a 5-star rating impact? What I found was that 84% of people are influenced to some degree by a star rating, but we still had like a solid 66% of people who would still go out and buy a book if they'd been interested previously, and the book got a low review by a booktuber that they followed, and the low review was 3 stars or less. So it was still quite indicative that, you know, bad or lower reviews of books, it actually doesn't have a huge impact on the number of people who are not buying the book. The people who hadn't indicated that they were still somewhat like that they were still likely to read it might have been a little less likely or somewhat unlikely, but I think on the whole that was really a nice statistic to discover, was that, you know, booktubers, you're not out there killing books with bad reviews, and I think honesty on booktube is always great in providing people with the information that they need to know whether they want to go out and buy a book or still give it a go. So those are the statistics that I have to share with you today about people who are watching booktube. It's a little snapshot into sort of the background and premise to the research that I conducted last year. So I'd love to know your thoughts down below, and you can tell me which categories you fitted into and any further thoughts you had on that. These are obviously averages taken from the 100+ people that responded to the survey, to give people an idea of the kind of audiences that booktubers are interacting with. I think it's fascinating. I hope this is useful to some of you out there. I'm really looking forward to going forward and talking about the results that I got from talking to publishers about working with booktubers for review copies, and also to the booktubers that I spoke to about how they go about creating their content, their most successful videos, and their feelings about getting things reviewed on time, and as well as always the question about payment and how much money comes out of this kind of industry, if any at all. So you have all of that to come in future videos. I hope that you stick around to see a few of them. But other than that, I will leave that there for today. And again, I hope you took something from this video. I really enjoyed sharing my research with you, and I really enjoyed doing the research. But other than that, I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.
Alla gloria militar